Welcome to another episode of Crimes Notes. If you are starting the Solving One-Step Equations notes, that means that you have already completed the Inverse Operations Lab. And that's kind of a tie-in to today's lesson. So as usual, there's some do now questions at the top. So you need to do these three problems on your own. You already know how to do them. And then once you've completed those, you can come back and finish your video. So the next thing we're going to look at is the things to ponder section. The things to ponder, remember, we always do definitions or things that you need to know. And so when we're looking at this, it says, what is the goal for solving equations? Well, that was one of your vocabulary words. The goal for solving equations is to isolate the variable. And then it says, how do we solve equations? Well, in order to solve equations, we're going to use inverse operations. And then the third part, it says, what are some questions that you could ask yourself in order to help you solve equations? So the first question you want to ask yourself is, where is the variable? In other words, what are we trying to get by itself? The second question is, what operation is with the variable? In other words, are we adding, are we subtracting, are we multiplying, are we dividing? Then, what is the inverse operation? Meaning, what is the opposite? Because we said that in order to solve equations, we have to use inverse operations. So if we add, then the opposite would be to subtract. So we have to undo what was already there. So let's look and see some of the examples. Fold my paper as usual. So if we look at number 1, it says p plus 5 equals negative 10. Well, the first thing that I would do would be to divide the problem. So if you draw a line down the equal sign, you're trying to see which side the variable is on, and it's on this side. So we found the variable is p. It says what operation is with the p? Well, we have positive 5. So the inverse operation would be to subtract. So in order to move this 5 to the other side, we have to do the opposite. And I would do minus 5, and then it would be ready to put into your calculator. So what should happen is these two should be opposites. Plus 5 and minus 5 should cancel out, leaving me with just p on the left-hand side of the equation. Then the line represents our equal sign, and then you could go ahead and put this in your calculator. So we would put in negative 10 and then minus 5. Don't put negative 5, minus 5. So this would be negative 15. And again, the reason that we subtracted it on both sides is that equations are like a scale. Right now they're equal, but if I take 5 from this side and I don't take 5 from this side, now my scale isn't equal anymore. So remember, you always, well, let's do it this way, because this is what you'll hear me say. What you do on one side you should always do on the other side. Okay, you've got to keep it balanced. Okay, so let's look at one more, okay, number 2. Again, I'm going to start by drawing the line. So if I draw the line down the equal side, now I'm going to find the variable, because that's my first question. Where's the variable? Well, it's on the left-hand side. What is with the variable? What operation? Now, this plus, remember, goes with the x. So we need to look at this, the sign of this. So the 9, since it doesn't have a minus sign, is positive. So we would say if it's positive, the inverse operation, or the opposite, would be to subtract. So minus 9, again, what we do on one side, we always do on the other. We would draw the line and we double check. 9 minus 9 does cancel. That leaves me with x, so I bring that down. And then I would be calculator ready, so I could go ahead and put in my calculator. 17 minus 9 gives me 8. Okay, and that would be my solution. Good. So now I want you to try number 3 on your own. Again, you would draw the line, right? Find the variable, look at the number that's with the variable. It's subtraction, so you need to use addition to solve. Number 4, again, I'm going to have you do it on your own. But remember, here's the variable. What is with the variable? The negative 13. So since this is subtraction, you would need to add. This sign goes with the R, remember? So try to get those two completed. Okay. And then we'll move down to number 5. So number 5 is a little weird because we've got two signs. And for many of you, I've even circled this on your paper and told you, we don't do double signs. So we need to get rid of that. So if you remember, there's kind of an imaginary 1 right here. We've got to get rid of the parentheses first. So if I distribute that 1, I have m, and then 1 times negative 34 is negative 34, and then equals negative 21. So now I've gotten rid of those double signs. So if I draw my line, here's my variable now. What's with the variable that needs to be moved? A minus 34. What's the inverse operation? Subtraction would be addition. So I'm going to add 34, and what I do on one side, I always do on the other. So then this would cancel. I bring down the m, and then I would be calculator ready, so I could type in negative 21 plus 34 and press enter. Once I've done that, it says 13, so I know my answer here would be 13. Okay, so let's look at, well, let's put a little note, sorry, our notes to self over here. Distribute to remove double signs. And so if we look at number 6, it's the same thing. We have a double sign. So remember, this would be that imaginary 1. I would distribute that negative 1, so I bring the R down. Negative 1 times negative 8, negative times a negative makes a positive, so positive 8 equals negative 14. So now I'm ready to draw the line and solve, but I'm going to let you guys finish solving that one. Okay? All right, so moving on, we're looking at number 7. It looks like I might need to kind of fold my paper again here. There we go. That way you guys can see. Number 7 says negative 5t equals 60. And I would go ahead and draw my line here. Okay. But this one is kind of harder. So we find the variable, it's t, it's right here on the left-hand side. But the number that's with it is negative 5, but this is not addition or subtraction. If you remember, we said side by side means multiplied. And we've said that over and over again in these notes. So since there's nothing between the negative 5 and the t, the two numbers are side by side, this represents multiplication. That means that the inverse operation here is division. So to represent division, we're not going to use the old divided by sign, we're going to use a fraction bar. So I would say divide on this side and divide on this side. And we're going to divide by whatever number is in front of the variable. So again, when dividing or multiplying, you will use whatever number is with the variable. And the reason that I say this is that every other problem, we've kind of been changing the sign. If this was a positive 5, we made it a negative 5, but that's because addition and subtraction were opposites. So then the same thing down here, when this was a negative 34, we made it a positive 34, but it's because subtraction and addition were opposites. So it's not that we're changing the sign, it's that we're using the inverse operation. So when we're multiplying by negative 5, this is negative 5 times t, the opposite is to divide by negative 5. So I'm going to put divided by negative 5, divided by negative 5. If I put this in the calculator, it's going to give me a 1, and that means that it cancels out. So I'm going to cancel those out and put a t, and then this side would be ready to go into the calculator. So if I put in 60 divided by negative 5, it tells me negative 12, and therefore that's my solution. So I want you to use this same method to solve this one. If we draw the line, this is side by side means multiplied, so this is multiplication. The inverse operation is division, so I want you to divide by whatever number is with the variable to get the solution. All right, so let's look at number 9. Number 9, we're going to draw our line. It says, where's the variable? Here it is on that left-hand side. Okay, what is with the variable that needs to go away? The negative 4. But what operation is it? Well, this fraction bar means to divide. This is r divided by negative 4. So the opposite is to multiply. So I'm going to multiply, and I'm going to go ahead and use brackets or parentheses. You can use a dot. You can use whatever you want. So I'm going to multiply on this side by negative 4, and I'm going to multiply on this side by negative 4. So if I multiply on this side, these two should cancel out, leaving me with just r. And then on this side, I would type in 15 times negative 4. And I would get negative 60. Okay. Good. So then number 10, I'm going to set it up, but then I'm going to have you do it. Notice here, okay, when they put 1/3 k, that's the same thing as putting the k on the top, okay? But if you see a fraction, instead of just multiplying, because over here, there's technically a 1 here, so I multiplied by negative 4 over 1, okay? Right, because there's actually a 1, so I flip the fraction and multiply. So if we look at number 10, okay, this is division because we see a fraction, so I am going to multiply, and I'm always multiplying by the number that's in the denominator, okay? And I can kind of put that here. Multiply by denominator. So this denominator is 3. So if I multiply by 3, I can actually do over 1, but that's the same thing as multiplying by 3. So when I do that, I'm going to kind of show you in the calculator what happens. If I take 1/3, so control divide, there's 1/3, and I multiply that times 3 over 1, notice I get 1, which means that these two things actually cancel out and leave me with k. So on the other side, I want you to do control divide, and you would multiply by 3 over 1, and then that is times 13, which is 39. Good. So I'm going to leave 11 and 12 for you to do. I want you to kind of take a glance. Notice that your variable is on the other side. So here's the variable. This is what we're trying to get rid of. What operation is it? It's subtraction. So to solve, you're going to use addition. Okay, I'm just giving you little hints. On this side, remember we would draw the line. Here's our variable. 2.3 side by side means multiplied, so on this one you should use division to solve. And see if you guys can do those, okay? And please remember, you can always test your answer. So our answer was -60 here. So if I put in -60 divided by -4, I get 15, which is the solution. Same thing. This was t equals -12. So if I go back and I do -5 times -12, whoop, hit the wrong button, I do get 60, which is this. So you shouldn't really miss any of the problems because you can actually go back and check them yourself. Or I'm going to require you to show work, but you could also check them using InSolve since many of you already know how to use that. All right, remember I am here if you have any questions.